Hello, everyone. This is Michelle Hodges, the Dyslexia and Literacy Intervention Specialist for the Arizona Department of Education. Thank you so much for joining us for this assessment video series, where we will showcase the universal screeners and vendors who have been approved to meet the needs of the Move On When Reading and Dyslexia legislation for the 2020-2021 school year. Although this video series does not replace the extensive training provided by each individual vendor, this series is a brief overview of each approved screener and may also be used to assist schools and school districts in making a universal screener selection. It was well put by the International Dyslexia Association. Screening measures, by definition, are typically brief assessments of skills or abilities that are highly predictive of a later outcome. Screening measures are designed to quickly differentiate students into two groups, those who require interventions and those who do not. A screening measure needs to focus on specific skills that are highly correlated with broader measures of reading achievement, resulting in a highly accurate sorting of students. The following Move On When Reading and Dyslexia legislative requirements can be found in A.R.S. 15704. Each child who enters kindergarten through 3rd grade will be given a universal literacy screener within 45 days of entry, as well as screened during winter and spring benchmark periods. This benchmark data will be submitted to the Move On When Reading team by October 1st, February 1st, and June 1st, which follows the normal Move On When Reading requirements. Each approved vendor has been through a rigorous vetting process by the Arizona Department of Education's Request for Information procedures. Each vendor provided extensive and technical information to ensure their product met the following requirements. The submeasures shown here are broken down by grade level. You will hear directly from the vendors how their assessment tool measures each of these indicators. Universal screening tools should be administered by individuals who have taken the minimum training deemed appropriate by the vendor. All assessors should also follow the vendor's specific guidelines and recommendations for valid implementation. It takes deliberate and additional training to accurately interpret and analyze screening data. It is important to remember that screening alone does not diagnose dyslexia. Richard Selznick best reminds us, dyslexia screening is a tool for identifying children who are at risk for this learning disorder. This means that screening does not diagnose dyslexia. Rather, it identifies predictor variables that raise red flags so parents and teachers can intervene early and effectively. Universal screening of all students is an important first step. Now I will turn it over to one of Arizona's approved vendors.
Hello, this is Kelly Powell-Smith, Vice President and Director of Research and Development at Acadience Learning. I am pleased to provide an overview of Acadience Reading K-6 for Arizona's educators. Acadience Reading K-6 was previously published as Dibbles Next. It is the same assessment. Acadience Learning is the home of the research and development as well as the authoring team for Acadience Reading K-6, including Roland Good and Ruth Kaminsky, the original authors of Dibbles Next and all earlier versions of Dibbles. Users of Acadience Reading K-6 may obtain assessment materials for free download from Acadience Learning. Many users of Acadience Reading K-6 prefer to obtain pre-assembled classroom assessment kits, and those kits are available through our publishing partner for Acadience Reading K-6, Voyager Sopris Learning. The classroom kits contain everything a teacher would need to conduct benchmark assessment 3 times per year. Voyager Sopris Learning also is the distributor of our Acadience Data Management Service. Acadience Reading K-6 is a set of measures used to assess early literacy and reading skills for students from kindergarten through 6th grade. With Acadience Reading, Arizona K-3 educators will be able to do the following: identify students who may be at risk for reading difficulties, including dyslexia, help teachers identify areas to target for instructional support, monitor at-risk students while they receive additional targeted instructional support, and examine the effectiveness of your school's system of instructional supports. Acadience Reading provides one of the best methods of identifying students who are at risk for early reading difficulties, including dyslexia, for monitoring those students to determine whether they remain at risk, and for identifying students who are not making adequate progress and should be referred for further assessment. Acadience Reading is specifically designed to be used within a comprehensive school-wide model of literacy support designed to prevent reading failure. As early as kindergarten, Acadience reading results predict the likelihood of students experiencing reading difficulty in the future, provides teachers with evidence-based instructional targets for instruction and intervention, and provides a means to evaluate progress towards those targets in time to be able to modify instruction and intervention. Acadience Reading K-6 is just one part of an effective school-wide literacy system. First of all, we need to consider what our goal is. Our goal is to have all students be readers. And if that is our goal, we need to consider what it takes to get there. One piece of an effective system is assessment, and this is where Acadience Reading K-6 fits in. Acadience Reading is one part of the assessment system in a school. Acadience Reading, as part of an assessment system, allows educators to make data-based decisions. The assessment system may include other compatible assessments used for other purposes. For example, diagnostic assessment that would be used as a follow-up to a screening assessment or a progress monitoring assessment. What else is necessary for an effective school-wide system? Well, we should consider things like research-based curricular tools, instructional programs, materials and strategies, professional development, as well as other things that we might consider part of the literacy environment and resources. Early screening with Acadience Reading K-6 aligns with the primary or main purposes of Acadience Reading K-6, which are to, first of all, identify students who may be at risk for reading difficulties, including dyslexia, to help teachers identify areas to target for instructional support, to monitor at-risk students while they receive additional instruction, and to examine the effectiveness of a school system of instructional supports. The assessment is designed to support the prevention of future difficulties through early screening and by facilitating targeted intervention. We know we can make a difference for children who are at risk through identifying them and providing explicit and targeted instruction designed to meet their needs. There are several important features of Acadience Reading K-6. To be useful for screening and progress monitoring of early literacy skills, the measures need to have certain features. Among those features are things like being efficient and economical or not taking a lot of time, measuring those critical skills of interest, such as those essential early literacy and reading skills, having standardized procedures so that every student at every opportunity receives the same directions and in the same way. They have to be repeatable so we can do progress monitoring assessment. We want the measures to be sensitive to small changes in growth over short periods of time. They need to have technical adequacy, such as reliability and validity. And with these measures, we also have research-based goals and cut points for risk that facilitate decision-making. Acadience Reading K-6 measures are a set of indicators of a student's academic health in reading, much in the same way that measures of height and weight are indicators of overall health and well-being and development for young children. What this means is that the assessment provides a sense of overall health in the broader area of reading by assessing a key aspect or aspects of that area in a very efficient way. Key within the outcomes-driven model when using Acadience Reading K-6 are benchmark goals. Benchmark goals are empirically derived criterion reference target scores that represent adequate reading progress. As such, benchmark goals represent the lowest level of performance on a measure that predicts reaching the next goal. It consists of 3 parts: a basic early literacy skill or essential early literacy skill, for example, phonemic awareness, a level of performance on that skill, and a point in time, for example, fall of kindergarten. A benchmark goal indicates a level of skill at which a student is likely to achieve future reading outcomes. The benchmark goals are based on research that examine the predictive validity of a score on a measure at a particular point in time compared to later Acadience Reading K-6 measures and external outcome assessments. There are 3 primary levels of performance when we compare to benchmark goals. First of all, if a student achieves a benchmark goal, the odds are in their favor of that student achieving later reading outcomes. The first level of performance to consider is at or above benchmark. For these students, the odds are generally in their favor, about 80 to 90% of them achieving subsequent benchmark goals and important reading outcomes. In this instance, the student is likely to make adequate progress with effective core instruction. There is a subset of this group that we refer to as above benchmark. And for this group, the odds are generally 90 to 99% of achieving subsequent benchmark goals and important reading outcomes. These students are not likely to need support in order to make adequate progress. Another level of performance is below benchmark, and for this group, the odds are generally 40 to 60% of achieving subsequent benchmark goals and important reading outcomes. Students in this group are likely to need strategic support to make adequate progress. And the final group, well below benchmark students, these are students whose performance is below the cut point for risk. For these students, the odds are generally 10 to 20% of achieving subsequent benchmark goals and important outcomes. And students in this group are likely to need intensive support to make adequate progress. Benchmark goals are available for all Acadience Reading K-6 measures and for the composite score. So let me mention what is the composite score. For each grade and time of year, the measures that correlate highly with later outcomes are combined into what we refer to as a reading composite score. Each measure that goes into the composite score is weighted so that all of those measures contribute approximately equally to the composite score. Benchmark goals and cut points for risk are derived for the composite score in the same manner as they are for the individual measures. The reading composite score represents a rich and broad sample of behavior and helps convey that all the aspects of reading proficiency are critical. The reading composite score is highly correlated with a broad range of reading outcomes. This slide provides a visual illustration of how Acadience Reading K-6 works. First, at the beginning of the year, a student is assessed as part of the fall screening. We see in this example that their initial performance, that first X on the graph, falls within the well below benchmark range. That's that red zone. Remember, these students have about a 10 to 20% chance of reaching subsequent goals. We can look to the spring benchmark goals to help us decide where we want the student to be at the end of the year. See the target on the right-hand side of the graph? We set that as the student's goal. If they reach that goal, at the end of the year, they will be in the at or above benchmark range, meaning that the odds are in their favor of reaching subsequent goals. We can draw a line between the initial performance and the target goal and begin progress monitoring the student. As we monitor the student, we can see if they are on track to meeting their goal. For example, we can also ask whether or not the data is telling us that the intervention we have implemented or the instruction we are providing is effective. If not, this information provides important feedback that allows us to make changes in a timely manner. This slide lists the required Acadience Reading K-6 measures for kindergarten according to Arizona state law. Each measure is listed on the left-hand side of the screen, and the key or essential skill assessed is listed next to it on the right-hand side of the screen. This slide lists the required Acadience Reading K-6 measures for first grade according to Arizona state law. And again, the measures are listed on the left-hand side of the screen, and the essential early literacy and reading skill onto which they map is listed on the right-hand side of the screen. And here we have listed the required Acadience Reading K-6 measures for second grade and third grade according to Arizona state law. As you see, there are two of them, oral reading fluency and maze, and the essential skills that they map onto are listed on the right-hand side of the screen. Now I would like to mention some considerations relative to training, administration, and scoring of Acadience Reading K-6. In terms of training requirements, though administration requires no specific expertise, it does require adequate training in the administration and scoring procedures and is a way to ensure fidelity of assessment. There will be additional information about training options provided later in this presentation. And then for administration, the assessments may be administered individually to students through paper pencil administration or through a blended administration. For example, using a tablet for scoring and then paper for student materials. And then maze could be completed via a whole group using either paper pencil or on the computer. With respect to the approximate time needed to complete a benchmark or screening assessment with Acadience reading K-6, the time varies based upon the time of year and the grade level. So, for example, as you can see on the slide, for kindergarten it ranges anywhere from 5 to 9 minutes, whereas for third grade it's about 6 minutes per student. But that does not include the group administered 5 minutes per classroom for Maze. And fall, winter, and spring testing windows are not preset for districts or schools, but recommendations are provided. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Elisa Dorman, who will talk more about scoring of the measures, reporting, training, and contact information for obtaining additional information.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we'll look at each of the individual measures found in Acadience reading. First, we'll look at first sound fluency. In first sound fluency, the assessor will say a series of words, one at a time, and will ask the student to respond by giving the first sound in the word. The student is given credit when they can identify the first sound or phoneme in isolation, or when they can give the first part of the word, which may include the initial consonant blend, consonant plus vowel, or consonant blend plus vowel. On the slide, you will see the paper pencil format on the left, and you'll see the digital assessment format on the right. Again, this is an early indication of phonemic awareness. This measure is given in kindergarten. The next measure is phoneme segmentation fluency. In this measure, again, we're continuing the indications related to phonemic awareness. The assessor presents the word to the student and asks the students to segment or say all the sounds in the word. The number of points given are the number of correct sound segments produced in a minute. Those can be either individual phonemes or blended sounds or word parts. You'll see on the screen the paper pencil format on the left and the digital format on the right. Again, this measure is given in kindergarten and at the beginning of first grade. The next measure is letter naming fluency. Letter naming fluency is used as an additional risk indicator. It is given in the kindergarten and beginning of first grade. In this measure, the assessor will show the student a page of letters, and the student will be asked to name the letters. The scoring is the number of correctly named letters in 1 minute. You'll see on the left again the paper pencil format for letter naming fluency, and on the right the digital format for letter naming fluency. The next measure is nonsense word fluency. Nonsense word fluency is a measure of alphabetic principle and early phonics. This measure is given from the middle of kindergarten to the beginning of second grade. In this measure, the assessor will show the student a page of nonsense words. The student will be asked to read the words or name any letter sounds they know. The scoring is 2 parts, correct letter sounds and whole words read. The student is given a point for every correct letter sound association within the minute, and they're also given a separate score for the correct number of whole words read within that minute without being sounded out first. You'll look on the left and you'll see the paper pencil version of the Acadience nonsense word fluency measure, and you'll see on the right the digital representation of that same measure. Again, nonsense word fluency is a measure given from kindergarten through first grade and into second grade, and it's a measure of early alphabetic principle and phonics. The next measure is oral reading fluency. There are 2 essential components to oral reading fluency. This slide represents the oral reading portion. In this measure, the assessor will give the student a passage and ask the student to read the passage. The student's score will be reflective of the number of correct words read within the minute and also the percentage of those words read accurately. So in the oral reading portion of oral reading fluency, 2 scores are obtained. 1 score for words correct and 1 score for accuracy. You'll see on the screen again on the left a sample of that passage for paper pencil administration, and on the right, you'll see the scoring portion from the digital platform. Again, the second part of oral reading fluency is really about retell. And the oral retell, the student is asked to tell about the story they just read. The way that this measure is scored is that the student is given credit for the number of words in the retell that are about the story they just read. They're given a point for every word spoken in their retell, and they're also given a rating on the quality of their response. You'll see here on the left the paper pencil format, and on the right the digital format. And again, the two component parts of oral reading fluency, both the oral reading portion and the oral retell portion, address accuracy, fluency, and the relationship to comprehension through the retell and the retell quality. This measure is given beginning in the middle of first grade and continues through the end of third grade. The next measure is MAISE. MAISE is a measure of silent reading comprehension. This measure can be given individually or as a group. In this measure, the assessor asks the students to read a passage and then to circle the word that makes the most sense in the story. So students will read along and they'll come to a box. They'll have a choice of 3 words. They'll circle the word that makes the most sense in the story. The student is given credit for the number of correct responses with an adjustment for guessing. You'll see here the paper pencil format on the left, and you'll see the digital format on the right. MAISE is a measure that is given in third grade. The next measure is Rapid Automatized Naming, or RAN. Acadience RAN is a measure that is used to provide additional indications of risk. In this measure, the assessor shows the student a page of items. They might be objects, letters, or numbers. The student is asked to name these items, and the student is given score based on the number of seconds it takes for the student to name all the items on the form. So different than the other measures in Acadience reading, where they are fluency-based measures timed at 1 minute, RAN is a measure that actually counts the number of seconds total that it takes for the student to complete the entire form. This measure is given in kindergarten and first grade, and again, it is used as an additional risk indicator in identifying students who may have reading difficulties. Next, we'd like to introduce you to Acadience Data Services. Acadience has 2 data services, Acadience Data Management and Acadience Learning Online. Each of these data services are designed to help the educator to track the progress of their students, to track the progress of groups of students, and to be able to use the information to help support informed decision making. These reports can also be generated at the school or at the district view, and we'd like to tell you more about each of those in the slides to come. The data management service known as Acadience Data Management has been a legacy system that we've had at Acadience Learning for many years. It is designed specifically for the paper pencil administration. In this data service, the educators are given the option to manually enter data and then to generate many different reports, as I said, from students, schools to system level. The Acadience Learning Online system is brand new to Acadience. It is an online test administration and data management service. And in this, the assessor is able to assess students online and then to immediately access the results through a dashboard interface that's very intuitive, as well as the ability to generate specific reports, again, at the student and systems level. Over the next few slides, we'd like to introduce you to some of the more popular reports in Acadience Data Management and Acadience Learning Online platform. Here on this screen, you'll see an overview or status report. This is an aggregate view of the data that's collected. You'll be able to see very quickly that you can see through the representations of graphs, the display of the different cut points for risk, red being well below benchmark, yellow being below benchmark, green representing at benchmark, blue representing above benchmark. Very quickly through this aggregate report, you're able to see the collection of students and their performance at any given time, beginning, middle, or end of year. You can also drill down or see below the individual performance at the measure level as well. So you can see the composite score as well as each of the individual measures reported, and that you can be able to see both the numbers and the percentages of students in each of these categories. On this next slide is a class report. In this class report, you'll see on the left Acadience Data Management and on the right Acadience Learning Online. The classroom report is a way to see all students within a class, to be able to see their performance at a given time of year, and to be able to look at each of the individual measures, and then also to be able to see the raw scores. Additionally, in this, you'll be able to see, for example, the national or local percentile. You'd be able to also see the Lexile when reported. You'll also be able to see their status, again, through the color coding system, whether or not they are well below, below, at, or above the benchmark. In our individual student summary reports, you're able to see the performance of students across time and to be able to look at those comparisons, whether you're looking by measure and you're looking from 2 times of year or you're looking across multiple measures, you're able to see the status of the student, again, their score representation, and you're able to see that historical perspective of one snapshot of a student's performance in these summary reports. Important for the educators who are supporting students is the ability to see item level detail. Inside of Acadience Data Management, there isn't a way to manually enter the individual item level detail. So what the educator in a paper pencil assessment would have is what you see on the left, and they would have that individual student score booklet, and within that score booklet they would have those marks that represent what is correct or incorrect and what is the student's actual response within the measure. And so that is what the educator in a paper pencil assessment would be using to get to the item level detail. In the digital assessment, Acadience Learning Online, when the assessor is capturing that information in their digital application, you'll be able to see here on the screen on the right that each of the marks that are being made inside of that application are being captured so that the assessor can return back into that page of item level detail and to be able to analyze and break that apart for better instructional planning. Next, I'd like to show you a little bit more about the goal setting feature inside both Acadience Data Management and Acadience Learning Online. In both of the data management platforms, we have a goal setting tool that allows educators to set meaningful, ambitious, and attainable goals for students. The goal setting utility supports setting goals at individual measure level, as well as at the composite score level. And once a goal is set, the data systems will then support reporting as students track towards those goals. Here I'd like to show you how the individual goals are represented in specific reports that we would generate for the student. And these are student pathway of progress graphs. Once the goals have been set, we can see how students are progressing towards those goals, both at the individual measure as well as at the composite score. And we can compare that student's progress to the progress of others in a normative context. Now we'd like to share with you some of the training that we offer to support educators in using Acadience reading. We have a series of workshops designed to support educators along their implementation of Acadience reading. The first workshop in the series begins with the Essential Workshop. And this is really the workshop that supports in-depth understanding of the conceptual and empirical foundations of the measures, as well as support for the training and administration and scoring of each of those individual measures. So this is really the first in the series, and it's really your nuts and bolts training that helps anyone who's going to be conducting assessment, whether that be a teacher, an administrator, an instructional leader or specialist, any personnel who'd be conducting the assessments would begin with the Essential Workshop. Next in the series is Acadience Reading Data Interpretation Workshop. And the Acadience Reading Data Interpretation Workshop supports educators after they've conducted benchmark assessment to be able to use and interpret the data for instructional decision making, to be able to examine that data at the individual student level, in sort of small group and classroom level, to be able to move that up to grade level and building level within the system. And we always use the outcomes-driven model as our framework for interpreting that data and to be guiding educators through a decision-making process so that they will know which reports to pull, which data to examine to inform next steps in both the system supports as well as the individual student supports. And again, this training is available to any educator, instructional leader, teacher, administrator, specialist, for anyone who wants to support the improvement of outcomes. This would be an appropriate workshop. Continuing in the series, we have a workshop known as the Acadience Reading Mentor Workshop. And this workshop is really designed to support individuals within school systems or within buildings to become what we call a mentor. The individual who is able to know more about the interpretation of the measures, can apply that interpretation to support the system towards change, to support the individual students towards change. This is also the person who can be trained to become a trainer of others in their building so that when educators are new to the assessment, you have built the capacity to train them within that building, within that district. And so the mentoring workshop supports that capacity building that a lot of schools and districts would be seeking. There are prerequisites to the mentor workshop, and that is the prior two in the series. Educators must take the essential workshop and they must take the data interpretation workshop before they will be allowed to access the mentor workshop and to be able to complete their training to become official Acadience mentors. Next, we want to introduce you to a new workshop for those who are moving from Acadience in paper pencil or moving from Acadience in another digital platform to the new Acadience Learning online platform. And this workshop, Transitioning to Acadience Learning Online, will support users of the assessment to make that successful and seamless transition to the new platform. And again, it will include a review of and a refresher on the foundations and the research behind the measures, as well as a brief overview of the scoring procedures and use of those measures within the new Acadience Learning Online system. And that will include all of the benchmark and progress monitoring measures. It will also include Acadience RAN. As we close the presentation, we wanted to provide contact information that allows you to follow up with any questions that you may have, and to also let you know that we are here to support you with your implementation of Acadience reading. You'll see the first bullet is contact information for Acadience Learning. Acadience Learning is the home of the authors and the research team and development team, and we are here to support you if you have questions about the measures, about the interpretation of the measures, about the data and management services. But we also want to introduce you to your state-specific representative with our publishing company, Voyager Sopris Learning. So Voyager Sopris Learning is the partner that we have for publishing, where you can order your materials and where you can purchase your data services, both for Acadience data management as well as Acadience Learning Online. And so you'll see on the screen our contact information for both organizations, and together we are working to support you and would be pleased and happy to answer any questions should they arise. Again, thank you for your time.